Welcome to Unshakable Habits. I am your host, Stephen Box, and this week we are talking all about balancing your life. So if you're someone who is constantly overwhelmed, and feels like you can never get caught up, you're always behind no matter how hard you work, this is the week for you. So day one, we introduced this topic. Day two, yesterday, we actually talked about how this impacts your career and the importance of really getting clear on what those priorities are. And if you did not listen to yesterday's episode, make sure you go back and listen to it because Christine gave us a powerful exercise at the end of the episode that if you go back and do it, I promise you it will have an impact on your life. If this is your first episode that you're hearing this week, I am joined this week by Christine Jewell, author of Drop the Armor and a faith-based executive coach. So, Christine, welcome back to the podcast. I'm excited today. We're going to be talking about relationships. And you dropped a little hint on us yesterday that the problem we're going to talk about today is putting everybody else first. And
yes.
I know when people hear that, they go, what else am I supposed to do?
I think the problem that we really want to address probably as I think about it more, is really like resentment. We have this secret seething resentment that we really don't want to admit towards our spouse, maybe even our kids. Sometimes it's like all the things. And we're like also coupled with guilt. Like, I should be happy. I have a wife and or a husband and I have kids, but like, and you just always feel like leftovers, right? And so whatever the sound of that is, but I hear that a lot. I just feel like I'm always last, like everybody else is first. I'm like behind the kids. I'm at the bottom, right? And maybe I'll get some leftovers. And if you do take care of yourself, you feel guilty about it. Or maybe you hear about it.
Yeah, it's interesting because you never hear people say, I put everybody else first. That's not the complaint, right? The complaint is always, I put everybody else first and no one appreciates it.
Mm-hmm. I feel unappreciated. I feel disrespected, right? My wife doesn't respect me. My husband doesn't respect me. My kids don't respect me.
Yeah, I'm not seen. I'm not heard.
Mm-hmm.
So where does this come from? Like, why do we have this resentment in the first place?
Resentment is so interesting because resentment builds up when we feel like we're overgiving and there's an imbalance, right? Of now I'm giving and I'm pouring in and now you're not giving back. So I want to say this right away. It comes out of a broken system because now we're already in a system of transaction. I give to you, you're supposed to give to me. That would make sense, right? Like we're in a marriage. Of course, it's 50-50, but we know marriage is not 50-50. It's 100%. So really, again, I'm all about the challenge and invitation, but I want to challenge the listeners, even who maybe have been feeling that way, to really think, wow, have I really been unconsciously transacting with my people where I've been giving in order to get something? If I just give enough, then I can earn my time at the gym. If I just give enough, then he'll pay attention to me. If I just give, then they'll love me. Because at the root, it's already a broken system. Instead of saying, I'm somebody who gives from a place of overflow, where there's more than enough in me to give, and so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right? I'm giving because that's what a giver does, but I give from a full place.
Yeah, and I think some of what we've talked about the last couple of days ties in here, right? If your career is really important and you're giving a lot of energy to that, if you maybe had that programming growing up teaching you that you had to be successful, that you had to reach certain levels of success in order to be liked, if those were the things that were programmed into you, then more than likely you are not going to be in a position to give from a place of overflow because you are barely keeping up to begin with.
Yeah. And I'm going to say something maybe a little challenging for people to hear, but I say this often to couples that I work with, is that you guys are making each other idols. Because as long as you're happy and you approve of me, I feel like I've done a good job. And now I can go and say, I'm using you as the source of my worthiness or affection. And I just want to challenge people again, using the model of Jesus. And again, this was a huge thing for me because I think especially in a lot of religious community or a lot of I care about everyone. I'm an empath. I care so much about everyone else. We've been so programmed to give and give and give and serve, and then you'll be loved, and then you're holy, and then you're worthy. When in reality, Jesus started his day connected, hanging out in solitude, right? It was like he went to pray, he went in solitude. And so I think when we think of who do I want to follow, whose example do I want to follow, he served, like when he was with the people, he poured into the people. But because he poured from a full place of going and connecting to the source of life, right? So that morning time of solitude, that morning time of prayer, that morning time of working out, whatever it is for you. One of the things I say is you've got to go to the well to connect before you go pour into others. Otherwise, where are you giving it from?
Yeah. Yeah. I talk all the time about there's 5 routines that I think are so important to have. A morning routine, a afternoon routine, and an evening routine, and then also a pre and post work routine. Because if you do not have those routines, it can be so hard to create these boundaries and to be able to give the way that you want to give, because you're going to be distracted and things are going to bleed into each other. You have to be able to create some separation there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I agree. Having a bookend, right? Are you starting the day from a full tank? And that's really it. And again, I believe, like for me anyways, I don't want to be in transactional relationships. I don't want to be someone that is always, if I start feeling resentful about something, I know that something is off kilter, because I know now that I've dropped into a transactional relationship and I'm not honoring boundaries. And so it's okay. And what I'm really protecting, I talk about this concept in the book of being a warrior who is able to fiercely protect the atmosphere in your home. So for me, as a warrior of the heart, it's my duty to protect peace in my home, or like the energy that we bring into the house. And if I'm exhausted and I'm burnt out and I'm bringing all my baggage from the last conversation I'm in because I feel bad about somebody being upset with me for a minute, instead of saying, you know what, I got to be really conscious and intentional about what I bring into my house or into my marriage. Now I'm protecting the atmosphere and I'm taking care of bringing the best version of myself. But it's even way more than that. I'm bringing love into the air, bringing peace into the air, bringing vitality or energy, instead of just like I'm bringing an empty, distracted, frustrated, tired person that's going to be very reactive, right? And everybody's walking on eggshells around you. And I think so many people are in these relationships, marriages, family homes, where everybody's walking on eggshells. Like nobody's really talking about what needs to be talked about because everybody's worrying about hurting someone else's feelings. And we're so worried, instead of saying, you know what, I'm here to pour into the atmosphere from a full place.
Yeah, I think it's so important to figure out what kind of person do you want to be, right? What kind of parent do you want to be? What kind of spouse do you want to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't have that clarity, then like we talked about yesterday, that ability to say yes to certain things, no to certain things, and knowing which ones you need to say yes and no to, you can't have that. If you don't have that clarity on the person you actually want to be, then you don't know what to say yes and no to.
Yeah. And I'd love to ask the question of what is the purpose of being a parent or a spouse? I ask people that because if you don't know the purpose of something, you'll abuse it. Or you're just like, is the purpose of being a parent to be like, oh, I'm a taxi driver and I'm like the one that needs to be at every single game and cheer everybody on and help them every day with homework and do everything for my kids? It was my role to equip and empower my children to be independent thinkers. Like we all have different answers to this question, right? But I think, again, it's really identifying what is my role as a wife or a lover. It's not to be my husband's coach, babysitter, mother, like all the things. It's to be his wife. And that's it. And I don't have to carry the weight of doing all the other things.
And I think, and please tell me if I'm wrong here, but I think so many people where they get into trouble especially when it comes to this relationship topic, is they went into the relationship with certain expectations, right? Where it's, I became a parent because that's what society told me to do. And that's what I thought I had to do.
Mm-hmm.
Or I got married because that's what people do. And now you did it to fulfill a need for you, right? Or to meet an outside expectation.
Mm-hmm.
And so for someone who finds themselves in that position, how do they change that and really do what you're talking about here and start to be that cup filler who already is having their cup overflowing versus someone who's just stuck in that transactional position?
Yeah, I think I do. That's a great question. And I think a lot of us don't slow down and stop to actually ask ourselves those questions. And we evolve over time. We evolve over time. So pausing to say, hold on a second. For whatever reason, we got into this marriage or we had the kids or whatever, we made that decision from that level of consciousness, that level of awareness. So instead of going, oh, why did we do this? I don't really think it's beneficial to go back. I think it's beneficial to say, what do I want to create going forward? So I'm married. What kind of marriage do you want to create going forward? What kind of relationship dynamic? Who cares why it was like that? I think that is actually a very poor question when people are asking why. I'm like, that now what you start doing is beating yourself up and you're going back into the past. It's good to get wisdom, but really I'm a big advocate of keeping people in the present moment and in the future of what they're being called to create. So having a couple or a husband that says, you know what, wait a second, what kind of marriage do I want to have? What kind of leader do I want to be? What do I believe the purpose of marriage is? And asking yourself these questions, because I'll tell you, whenever I do VIP days or work with couples and I ask them this question, what's the purpose of your marriage? They'll look at each other and like, what is the purpose of our marriage? Like a lot of times they're waiting for the other person to answer the question instead of, oh, it's to multiply each other, to like do life together, multiply everything that God gives us and support each other. And what is it? Is it so that we're not lonely? I think it overwhelm again, because that was the whole overarching thing, is if you're walking around on eggshells and you're putting yourself last, like you can't possibly be leading intentionally.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's
your marriage.
It's funny because something that kind of caught my attention as you were talking about that was, if you think about the way that most marriages today work, we had this shift in the last 20, 25 years where somehow children became the center of the universe.
Yeah.
I didn't think that way. It wasn't that way when I grew up, I assure you. But when somewhere in the last 20, 25 years, I think this has tended to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Now what we have is mom is trying to do all the stuff in the house and take care of the kids, and she's trying to do things for her husband, and the husband is working hard, is trying to provide for the family and all this other stuff. And so now everything comes back to everyone is trying to do stuff for other people. And it just ends up leading to this situation where, like you said, everyone's, oh man, I'm resentful of all this stuff, right? Because I don't feel like I have time for me and no one's doing anything for me, or at least they feel like no one's doing anything for them.
Yeah. And I got to say, because you're exactly right. We make the children the center of the ecosystem instead of bringing the children into an ecosystem. I always used to say that to my kids. I love you all. You're all my favorite at the age that you're at, and you're all my favorite in your own unique way, but you are part of the whole. The whole does not revolve around you. And they didn't like that message sometimes growing up, where they would go to other friends' houses and it was like, where the whole orbit would go around this kid. And I will ask people too, who runs your household? And they're like, my 8-year-old. And again, I think we've just developed this habit. And again, it's an unintentional habit. It's an unconscious habit instead of being intentional. And that's why I come back to asking ourselves the question often. And this is actually a habit that Mark and I, my husband and I had, which is like doing a weekly check-in with each other. Like, how are we doing in our relationship and in our leading of the family together?
Yeah.
And what do we get to do better this week? And sometimes we have to remind ourselves, we also have an 8-year-old, and it's like, Everett, you get to wait. You're not number one all the time. You're number one sometimes.
Yeah.
Right. And you are part of the ecosystem.
And you know what? At the end of the day, you are teaching your 8-year-old patience. Mm-hmm. You're teaching your 8-year-old that sometimes it's okay to prioritize yourself or to prioritize your marriage, right? Because now what they're going to do when they get in a marriage, they're going to say, it's okay to prioritize myself and my partner.
Exactly. And the kids know that there is a hierarchy. There is an order. We go for our walk around the block. We have the quiet time in the morning, and that's it. And then they also can't get in there and start to divide. I know kids will test you. Yeah. But again, you've got to get clear on what are we creating? What is our MO around here of how we're going to be operating? And you've got to fill yourself up first. Like, you can't lead your family if you're not being led from somewhere. Who's leading you?
Yeah.
For me, it's like led by the Lord so that I can lead people from this place. I don't think like I'm going out into the wilderness by myself. Like he's gone before me. And so that was another big lesson. I just want to throw that in as we wrap this session, but is like, if you want to stop feeling like leftovers, you have to stop having this idea that when everything else is taken care of, then I can strengthen myself, nourish myself or whatever. Because if you've been called to lead, you need to be equipped, nourished, right? Like you're there for your people for sure, but do you have the capacity to lead well?
Yeah, I was going to ask you for a final thought, but I think you just gave it to me. So,
There you go.
and you know what? That is a perfect tie into tomorrow's topic, which is going to be health. So make sure y'all tune back in tomorrow for the wrap up here as we get into that third and final area that a lot of us are neglecting. And with that, I will just remind everyone that while none of us are born unshakable, we can all become unshakable because being unshakable is a choice.